There are 5 voice AI mistakes that I've seen almost every single developer make that are like ticking time bombs and could wreck your business if you don't fix them. Look, voice AI isn't a toy. It has to be treated with the same respect as a high-stakes employee. You're giving that agent power, real power, to speak on your behalf and actually take actions, because otherwise it wouldn't be valuable. But at the same time, if it screws up, there is no rewind button. One wrong email, one misspelled digit by this agent could cause you to lose deals, have angry customers, or overall just damage the trust of your brand. And after helping many companies from insurance to HVAC to even waste management save tens and tens of thousands of dollars every single year using this technology, I've figured out that there are 5 ticking time bombs that you have to disarm before even releasing this into the testing phase. Time bomb number 1 is that it doesn't repeat important details back to you before using a tool. Here's an example. So recently I built this AI which runs a campground. And this campground AI will make bookings and collect details. And as soon as it actually makes the booking on behalf of a customer, it has to collect their email and their phone number. And sometimes these AIs, they can misunderstand. They misunderstand digits or letters, and you have to have safety mechanisms in place. So one very easy thing to do is have a line in your prompt. And this has to be a thing that you implement always, is that before it's allowed to even use one of these tools, it has to repeat the information back to the guests and ask for confirmation. And only when it's confirmed, it's allowed to actually use and execute that booking. Another thing that you should do is get the AI to spell email addresses or phone numbers back letter by letter. And I know it might be a little bit tedious, and it can be very hard to get the AI to pronounce them after one another. Right? Even if you just tell it, pronounce it letter by letter, it might try to say them all at once, and that sounds Chinese as well. So try to put these little dashes in between and tell it to pronounce them this way. I've done a separate video on prompting. You can check that out on my channel. I won't go too deep into this now, but basically adding dashes and also telling it in the pronunciation how to pronounce these phone numbers and emails can make a massive difference. Same thing goes for the phone numbers, right? If you ask it to collect a phone number, you should also ask it to validate that phone number. And what I mean by that is, for example, it should check. We can actually do this live once. So in this case, we just asked the AI to collect the phone number, check if it has 10 digits, and if it doesn't have 10 digits, it's invalid and can't be used. So they need to inform the caller that it's invalid and they have to give you an accurate one. And after that's done, then repeat it back once more and ask for confirmation. This is such a multi-layered system which you can implement, which sure, maybe is a little bit of back and forth, but ultimately this is what you want, right? You want a system that double and triple checks if all the details are correct. I'm actually going to show you how to take this another step further. If you go into the advanced section on Vappy in this case, and then on messaging, you can add a server URL like make.com, for example, and you can add a webhook here and then get it to send over the end of call report, which is basically a transcript of the entire call. And you can have another AI module analyze that call and tell you what it thinks the email is. And then you can cross-reference the email that the AI thinks it should send and what the end of call report thinks the email is and see if they match. And this is a 4th layer of protection that you can add to actually send the right emails. The second ticking time bomb to avoid is that the AI hallucinates. You might give it a knowledge base of information and Q&As it can answer from, but there's one mistake that a lot of people make which cause this to only have an accuracy of 40 or 50%, which is pretty terrible. So basically what happens is that people see in Vappy, for example, that there's this file section in the assistant. And they go here and they upload a file, and then they think they should just connect the file to the assistant like this. That is a bad idea, because the way these searches work is that, in this case, the file search here, it will return a big chunk of information, right? So for example, if you say something like, do you offer salmon in a restaurant, for example, or vegetarian options, it won't just return that line with the answer, it'll return a whole paragraph. And that's not good, because the more info you put into the AI, the easier it is to get confused. So what's the fix? You still upload the file here, but instead of attaching the file directly to the assistant like we did before, you add it to a query tool. So you basically go on tools, you add a query tool, and then like with every single tool, you give it a description of when to use it, and then you click on add a knowledge base, give it a name, description when to use this specific knowledge base. You can actually add multiple, by the way, which is pretty cool. And then you add the file ID down here, which you find there. And then you have to, in the last step, attach that tool to your assistants, add the query tool, and publish it and save it. And now, instead of the assistant itself searching through the whole knowledge base, it just simply extracts the question from the conversation, sends that into the query tool, and that tool can retrieve a very accurate answer to that question and send it back into the assistant. So we're basically removing as much as possible from the assistant that does the talking and outsourcing it to tools that only have one function. This leads me very nicely into the third ticking time bomb, which is that you should try to split up big tasks into multiple little mini AIs. One of the first things I did was build a software for construction companies with AI, and I tried to get this thing to write the quotes, which can sometimes get up to 10 to 20 pages long. And I tried to put all of that detailed industry-specific knowledge into one AI that does everything. And the prompt itself was actually longer than this 10-page document. I'm not kidding. It was a huge prompt. And needless to say, it did not do very well. It hallucinated like crazy. The output weren't reliable. I couldn't even tweak it, and I didn't even know which parts of the prompt had an effect and made a difference. So the solution that I came up with, and you can actually find this as, I think, one of my very first videos on this channel. You can look at that, actually. I split up a big task into 36 individual AI models, which were only tasks of creating one paragraph. And this made it extremely accurate. So how can you apply this to voice AI? Well, there's two ways. In Vappy, what you do is you would basically make multiple assistants for one task. So, as you know, if you watch my channel, I work with hotels a lot. And instead of making one AI that does bookings and reservations and restaurants and questions, you would make 4 AIs. And each AI has a specific task. And then you would collect them up in a squad, for example. Now, a squad, as you can see, each of these is an agent. And then you have one booking agent, one for other, one for restaurants, one for events. And they can actually pass the call in between one another, depending on what the request and what the customer needs. And in the front end, the customer doesn't notice this, unless you want them to, right? You can also give these different voices if you'd like, but you can also make this invisible. And this way you break down a big task into smaller sections, which in the end is actually cheaper because, the shorter a prompt, the cheaper it is. And it's also way more accurate because the AI only needs to think for one specific part. You can also do this in retail AI conversational workflows. I've done many videos on this in the past. Just take a look at my channel, you'll find these pretty easily. But what these allow you to do is build workflows with conditions. And you can really build very, very accurate workflows. And basically this way, the AI, you can still give it an overall prompt, but it has a very structured way of following a specific set of instructions. So instead of just piling all the instructions in here, you give it a step-by-step guide on what to do. And you can even specify little mini prompts of when it's allowed to move on to the next section. So for example, here you could say collect X, Y, Z details. And then you can in here say only move on to the next node if these details have been collected and once again and confirmed. Right? And of course, this agent might be a little less creative. Maybe it can't adapt as nicely as the other ones. But to be honest, just listen to some of the examples on my channel. It still does an amazing job. And this results in pretty much no errors because the agent has nowhere to go but the next structured step. The fourth pitfall is that people try to get AI to do everything. And as weird as this sounds, even though all I do is build voice AI solutions, I spend most of my time trying to figure out how can I build something that isn't AI to do this job. Because at the end of the day, AI is fantastic, but it does make mistakes. And I spend a lot of time using, tools like Make.com or N8N to avoid letting AI do most of the work. AI is great for service level, for making decisions, for actually having the front end conversation. But everything that requires more than that should be removed from the AI and given to a tool that is automated, something like raw code or Make.com, a workflow that does exactly what you need it to do 100% of the time. So when you're building your next voice AI, try to think, how much of this do I actually need AI to do? And how much of it can be done by something else? The last bomb I want to tell you about is that you have to stress test the prompt, and you actually have to look into the role and the context of the AI. And this is a hack that not many people are talking about. But if you're trying to find why it's hallucinating or why it's doing things it's not supposed to, oftentimes it can come down to the role and the context. If you tell an AI, you are a very helpful and extremely knowledgeable customer success assistant that answers every question about XYZ hotel, for example, then even though it might search through the knowledge base and it doesn't find an answer, it still thinks, wait a moment, I'm actually really helpful and I find an answer for everything. Let me make up an answer. This section of the prompt, the first two sections, are very crucial, and you have to be really careful with them, because as soon as you give the AI an identity, it will try to live up to that as best as possible. So those are things, and I know this isn't a super concrete example, but when you're trying to find out why is this thing hallucinating, which part of my prompt is wrong, look there, because that's the essence, the first thing that the AI actually really knows about who it is and why it acts a certain way. All right, so I hope you got some value from this video. These 5 mistakes are things that you should absolutely avoid and put in an SOP to follow every single time when building a voice AI. There can really be the difference between having something really useful or something that can damage your business permanently. And if you're looking for someone to help you navigate the world of AI, I'm currently offering free AI consultation calls. The spots are quite limited at the moment, but if you're one of the first people to sign up, I'll sit down with you for half an hour all the way to 1 hour and give you a free consultation and help you solve any problem that you're facing in AI completely for free. So if you're looking for that, just use the first link down below, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.